Welcome to the Writing Black Joy podcast, where we celebrate the joyful narratives of Black creatives, changing the world one story at a time. I am your host, Sophia Robinson. Here, you'll find conversations with some amazing Black writers and creatives, learn more about their projects and the joy they're bringing into the world, find inspiration for your own creative ventures, and dive deep into the topics that we think and write about. The guests on this podcast are writers of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, music, plays, and so much more, as well as creative guests whose work is all around writing joyful narratives on history's pages. So if you are a writer, a creative, or a lover of the arts, or you simply want to hear some good conversations, keep on listening and welcome to the show. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. I hope that you have been enjoying the season so far. If you have, I would love for you to hit subscribe wherever you listen and also to join my mailing list. You can do that over on www.writingblackjoy.substack.com, and there's also a link in the show notes. Today, I am joined by a cousin of mine. I always love having family members on the podcast, and today it was no exception. Nailah is a life and leadership coach who helps leaders tap into their power and build lives that are whole, good, and full of possibility. She is also the author of Joyful by Nature, Embracing Outdoor Adventures as Women of Color. Created for the modern woman of color, Joyful by Nature is your guide to reconnecting with nature and reclaiming your place in the outdoor community. Nailah and I had a fun conversation where we discussed connecting with nature as a way of connecting to ourselves, how she looked at a move from California to Utah for her family as an opportunity to get outdoors and embrace getting into nature, wanting to encourage and support women of color in what being outdoorsy looks like to them, particularly since there has not been a lot of representation of people of color, or as I like to say, global majority in the media when it comes to the outdoors. She and I also talked about how she spends her time outdoors during the year, the links between movement, nature, and creativity, her own creative practice with writing the book, and how getting outdoors contributed to that, the fears around repetition as a creative and different ways to think about it. And she gives us so many reasons to grab her book so that you too can build well-being into your life by getting outdoors. He also talked a bit about tea. So grab a cup and settle in for this episode. Welcome, welcome. So I have with me, I've been lucky. This is the second time I've had family. No, the third time actually that I've had family on the podcast, which I love. So I'd love to welcome Nailah to Writing Black Joy. So glad to have you. So glad we're able to catch up. So you wrote a book. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Joyful by Nature, Embracing Outdoor Adventure as a Woman of Color. So let's just dive right in. You know, our listeners have heard all about you in the intro. So let's just dive right in. And I'd love to know, tell me about the book. Tell me about your first book, Joyful by Nature. Let's hear it.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm so excited and also just kind of blown away. I never thought of myself as an author or a writer. And as you know, we have other authors and writers in our family. But the opportunity did come up to write more about, embracing outdoor adventure as women of color. So I feel really passionate about that topic. I feel really passionate about supporting women and their well-being through outdoor adventure and helping them to connect to the outdoors and to connect to nature as a way to just further connect to themselves. So, this opportunity, I was actually, contacted by, the publishing house, and they were looking for people who were interested in writing books about women of color and the outdoors. And I was like, that's fantastic, because that's exactly what I do, and that's what I'd love to talk about. So I wrote the book, and here it is. So really just grateful that they reached out, and just really excited that I'm able to share my thoughts and my words in this way.
Excellent. I love that. So I'm curious because I know that you are involved a lot in outdoor adventures for women of color. How did you get into that? How did you get into both the outdoor adventures and also specifically for women of color?
Yeah. Yep. So I have a background as a leadership coach and consultant. So that was the
Mm.
work I had been doing, forever, over 10 years now. And, in the midst of that, my family and I, we moved from Southern California to Salt Lake City, Utah. So anyone who's familiar with the cultures of those two places knows that that's a big shift. It's a big cultural shift. It's huge. And so when I got to Salt Lake City, I was like, either I can be mopey about it. I can be sad that I'm away from my friends and my family and my community and all these things that I had built up. Or I could really jump in and embrace a lot of the Utah lifestyle. And Utah is a beautiful state. There's lots of, just outdoors opportunities. It's surrounded by mountains. It's one of those states that gets solidly 4 seasons, and people are excited to be outside during all 4 of those seasons. So I was like, either I can be really depressed and mopey, or I can just kind of embrace this and get outdoors. So that's what I did. And as I was getting outside, I just realized how beneficial it was for me, both from a physical standpoint, like a mental standpoint, emotional. It was helping me to just feel a little bit more connected to my new home. And I was like, I think there are other women, specifically women of color, that would benefit from this. And I think I really focused in on women of color because for a couple of reasons. One, Utah doesn't have a huge population of people of color. So it's, I think that's definitely predominantly white. It's growing, it's shifting, the demographics are shifting, but yeah, we're not as represented. So I thought that would be a really great opportunity to support other women of color to, be able to get outdoors and kind of embrace in their new homes as well. And then I think the second thing that I noticed was that just people of color in general aren't represented outdoors in the way that, white folks are. So a lot of times the outdoors is not marketed to us. We're not kind of invited in. There's lots of different barriers of entry. So I just thought that it would be great to be able to focus in on women of color and support them in figuring out what does their outdoorsy mean to them.
Yeah, and I love that. There's a guest I had a couple of seasons back now called Myrna Valerio, and she does a lot of work as well with people of color on the outdoors. And she said something similar in terms of because she does marathon running and ultra marathons, and she's over there cycling, skiing, she's a proper outdoor adventurer. And she said something similar in terms of just the representation and the idea, like you said, about the marketing and that type of thing, and how, when she got out there and started just doing her thing, just being who she was in the outdoors, a lot of people it was almost like a permission slip, like, oh, I can, not that anybody was saying you couldn't, right? But just knowing that there are other people out there that you don't feel so isolated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Just being able to see that and say, oh, that's something I can do. And it's funny because Myrna is someone who represents that for me. I saw her on Instagram doing her thing, and I was just like, oh, wow. Again, kind of a little bit of that permission of like, oh, I can also do something like that.
Yeah. No, she's brilliant. She was fun. I enjoyed that conversation. So do you have a quote that you would like to share with us that represents joy for you?
So I think one of the quotes that really resonates with me, and it's from Jack Kerouac, the author. He's written many books, and they all have kind of an outdoor focus. But he said, in the end, you won't remember the days that you spent in the office, or you won't remember the days that you spent mowing the lawn. So go climb that damn mountain. And I thought that was really has a lot of impact because it's true. I think we spend our days worrying about a lot of things that are very important in the moment or are very urgent in the moment. And when we're, 80 years old and we're looking back on our lives, those are not the moments that matter. So I really try and look to that quote and just that idea of getting out there, looking for joy, doing things that really light me up, and just making those memories that I'm going to remember years from now.
Yeah, I like that. I was talking to one of my friends at work today, and we were talking about growing up and going to the beach, right? Because she grew up in Portugal, I grew up in Barbados, and I was like, I have so many more memories of going to the beach than I have being in a classroom or anything else. So I'm gonna take that as a sign to find my way to a beach this weekend. Well, not this weekend. I'm working this weekend, but yeah, soon.
Yeah, soon.
I like that. So tell me a little bit. You tell me a bit about what type of outdoor stuff you like to do.
Yeah, so I'm a big hiker. So I do a lot of hiking, and I love hiking because I think it's pretty accessible. I mean, when you get down to it, you're really just walking you're walking in like woods or the forest or whatever.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think, you can make it as hard or as easy as you want. A lot of times you get to hike to a waterfall or to like a beautiful like vista. So I think hiking is probably like my number one outdoor activity that I just do a lot of. But I do lots of, so like in the winter, we go snowshoeing a lot, which is kind of like, I guess, winter hiking. I'll do a little bit of skiing in the winter. And then also a lot of camping in the summer, which is fun for the kids too.
Yeah, good for you in the camping. I'm in Plymouth and it's a very outdoorsy town, city. Everybody's very outdoorsy and it's by the sea, so there's lots of beaches, lots of beach walks, coastal walks, and then there's a national park that's like on the other side. So it's Dartmoor, so people are like off on Dartmoor, walking the moors, rivers, streams, whatever. And so everybody's very outdoorsy. But I don't like winter. I'm an island girl. Being outdoors in the winter does not work for me. So I take my hat off to you and your snowshoes. I will, I'll send you a text with a warm hot cocoa in my hand.
Well, I'm good with that too. Yeah.
That's perfect. So tell me something, because I find whenever I walk, even if I'm just walking to work, the ideas flow. I find it's really good for my creativity. So I'm curious, how do you see the link between your sort of time outdoors and your creative, especially given that, you said you've written a book and you never saw yourself as a writer. So tell me how that outdoorsy walking movement as you said, connection with like yourself and connection with nature. What does that do for your creativity?
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree. I think that, and there's all types of studies that have shown this, that just being outdoors, even for a little bit, it really does help to kind of quiet the part of your mind, that little task manager part of your brain. That's like, the running to do stressed out about everything. Exactly. And like, oh, did you do this? So it helps to shut that part down, and it helps to light up these other parts of our brain. So the parts that are responsible for creativity and empathy and innovation and all of these other things. So I think it's true that just being able to get outside or move outside and just slow things down is really important for just our creativity, and just the way that we want to show up in our lives. So I completely agree. I think that being outdoors has natural meditative properties. So, I'm an LA girl, so know all about like meditation and yoga and all those. And I've just never been great at it. I'm not someone that's good.
Me neither.
Quieting my mind. But for me, if I get outdoors, it just naturally happens. And then it's like, okay, yeah, the ideas start to flow, or I could feel those stress levels go down. I feel a little bit more balanced. All of those things just kind of naturally happen, that I think we're often striving for.
Yeah. And I like that. I like the sort of the pace of it. And I think about, like, I lived in the UK on more than one occasion. I've lived in the UK, and the last sort of long chunk of time I spent living here, I was living in Gloucester, and I drove a lot. I drove everywhere. And now that I'm in Plymouth, I walk a lot more. Simply just, I don't have a car. I can't be bothered. You know, there's no parking close to the university. It makes no sense. So I just
Yeah.
walk to work, walk home. It's cool. I love it. And the first spring after I got here, I was like, I feel like I've never seen spring before. Like, how I've lived in the UK for years, but just almost like that, noticing like, oh my goodness, the flowers were beautiful. The different phases, like first they're the buds on the tree and then they're, and just realizing like this tree goes through a whole life in 1 year. Like, I know it sounds a bit lame, but like, I feel like I'd never really noticed that before. And those are the types of things I feel like they give me all my ideas because I'm walking and I'm thinking and I'm seeing the world around me and I'm like, ooh, ding, ding, ideas coming. So I absolutely love it. So tell us a bit about your creative process as a non quote unquote as a non-writer.
Yeah, as an honor.
About
I
you.
guess I have to change that title in my brain.
I listen, anybody who writes and publishes a book, I refuse to allow them to call themselves a non-writer. So I
Yeah.
say quote unquote because I don't care. I don't care if you say, "Well, I'm not really a writer." You've done the thing that 99% of people never ever do. So you're definitely a writer. But as somebody who didn't view themselves as a writer, tell us a bit about your creative process.
Yes. So I appreciate that perspective shift for sure. I think my creative process I think there is a lot of that needing that time and space to just be and think and let things kind of like, wash through my brain. And a lot of that does come from me being outdoors. So I think just my time, giving myself the space to do that a lot of times in the morning, especially I'm a little bit more of a morning person. So making sure I am able to get out, maybe on a walk in the morning, even if it's just, around my neighborhood, just to get like those ideas, that creativity flowing.
Mm.
And then I feel like I'm someone who I need some structure. I need some guardrails, but then within the guardrails, I need it to be a little loosey goosey. So
Yeah. That is exactly it. You want a little bit of structure, but you don't want to have. I almost feel sometimes like you don't want to be tied down to boxed in too much. Like you kind of want to let the thoughts and the ideas go where they go. Cause I always feel like I have this idea about writing. It's like the book writes itself. The book can write itself if you kind of don't hold on to it too tightly.
yes, I think so too. So yeah, so it was figuring out, kind of setting up like, okay, what's the structure that works for me, but then also making sure it wasn't too structured. So I did have that freedom to come and go. So getting a little bit more like structured in terms of like my schedule, where it's like, okay, I am going to make sure I'm carving out these blocks of time to write and to sit down and just like actually just get words on paper. I think also getting away, funny enough, from my home. So I work from home. So
Mm.
my office is in my home, but I found that it was difficult to write in my home office. So oftentimes I would have to like get away and go someplace else. So I did a lot of writing in bookstores and I did a lot of writing in coffee shops and just kind of getting away and getting into like a completely different environment was really helpful for me.
Nice. I love that. What did you have any obstacles in terms of, so let me backtrack. Had you done any writing before?
So I have never written a book before, but I have a lot of writing. So I think it's probably not fair to myself to say that I'm not a writer, but have
Oh,
done, I've written, blogs for years. So have always had like a blog or some sort of online presence that was writing. I had like a newsletter that I've, had for years and years where I would write a lot of these thoughts down. And then, also it sounds silly, but I did a lot of writing on social media. So would write a lot of kind of longer form posts, both on Instagram and Facebook throughout the years. So I have written before. I have, gone through that process of just getting my thoughts down
mm,
on paper, but this was
yeah.
my first time writing so much.
But I think a part of it is that translation of getting the thoughts out of your head. But
Yeah.
I think a big part of it is that you've also been sharing your writing for so long, because I think, I talk to a lot of writers who there's a block there of actually sharing your work. Sometimes it's like, what if people hate it? Sometimes it's like, what if nobody reads it? Sometimes it's, the trolls or whatever, or just feelings about your own ability to write because you remember being bad at English in third grade or
Yeah.
whatever, class 2 or whatever, school system you happen to be in. And so I think, I don't know if I could have written my first book if I hadn't blogged for so long.
Yeah.
And I'd been writing pretty much my whole life. But I don't know if I'd have written a book if I hadn't blogs for so long.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. I think that was a big part of what made it a little bit easier, to be able to be like, oh, okay, like I look back on some of my blog posts where sometimes for certain chapters of the books, I was like, I feel like I've talked about this before, and I'll look back and be like, oh, okay. So that also helped me get into the flow of writing certain things. But I agree. I think that because I had been putting my words out there for so long, that part was less of a hurdle. I think the obstacle that I ran into was getting over. I just really did not want to write a book where I felt like someone would read it and be like, oh, that could have been a blog post. And I think we've all had that feeling before. Especially with nonfiction books where you're like reading something and you read a couple of chapters into a nonfiction book and you're like, okay, that's it. That's the gist of the whole thing. I got, but then they have to flesh it out for 13 more chapters. And I was like, I don't want my book to be that way. And I think I had that like looming over my head so much that I got to the point and I was like, that's it. These are all the words that I have. It's done. And my editor was like, you have to write like 15,000 more words. I was like, I don't have it.
You can find some stuff. Dig deep.
Exactly. But she was wonderful. And she was amazing because she really was like, look, it's in your head. So this stuff, but you have to write it in a way for someone who's just picking it up and has never thought about outdoor adventure or who has never thought about wellness in this way. So I think that was really helpful in just like starting to break things down a little bit more and just kind of out in a way that was non-repetitive.
Yeah.
So I think that was the hurdle that I ran into was just like, oh, this is it. No more words. And I was
I wrote a TED talk. That's it.
And it was like, nope, you need to keep going.
But also, I think that is a sign of two things I would say. One is I think that's the sign of a good editor, because when I, was working with my editor for my first book, she was very much like, because the knowledge is already in your head, you've skipped things out. Like you've gone from A to like F, and like, the reader is not in your head. Yeah. But also picking up on that repetition. But the other thing I think, you talk about reading a nonfiction book and thinking like it could be a blog post. And I think that happens when you're somebody who's read a lot of nonfiction books and you're quite knowledgeable. So, I think about the very first, I won't say what it's called. If you want to find out the very first nonfiction book I read, you need to go and read my book. But, the very first nonfiction book I picked up, and it was life changing. It was mind blowing. I'm sure somebody who'd been reading those things for years would be like, oh my gosh, this is so derivative. Da, 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 da. But like, it was mind blowing to me because I'd never encountered those ideas before. So I think it's like anything. If it's the first time you've read something like this, and especially if you feel like it's a book for you, like you talked earlier about writing a book specifically for women of color. If as a woman of color, it's like, I've never seen anybody write a book about the outdoors for me. Right. Like that's mind blowing to them. Whereas like, this is your life. So it may not. Yeah, it may not feel that life changing to you, but I'm sure somebody's reading it and going, "Oh, I loved it."
Yes, I hope so. But yeah, I think you are so right. I think, once you're immersed in this world, whether it's like, yes, I read a lot of nonfiction or even fiction. I mean, all those, like, I read a lot of romance and it's like, yes, it has a
it has a cadence.
As a cadence, I know exactly what's going to happen. But yeah, that first romance book that I picked up probably was like, wow, this is amazing.
But also, you're still reading romance novels, aren't you? Even though you know exactly what's going to happen at the end. And this is the thing, like my sister. So the joke of it is you and my sister have the same name, right? So that always gets complicated when we're chatting. But my sister, who has the same name as you, always says like, there are only 7 plots, Sophia. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You're not wrong. But, I think about a particular book that I really enjoy reading. And there may be like 20 books in the series by now. And I swear up until probably the last couple of books, I could read it and I could tell you like on page 77, he's gonna beat up the biggest guy in the group. On page 86, he's gonna, meet the cute girl. Like and I still read every single one.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, there's a reason that they're still making these things.
Exactly. It's a reason it works. It's
I'm going through a superhero phase in my 40s, and I'm like, there's a reason that they keep making these superhero books that are like the same, or films, or comics or whatever. Like the plot's pretty much the same. Like people are devouring them every single time. So don't underestimate the power of repetition and familiarity, right? And just that cozy, comfy feeling.
Yes, you're so right.
I'm curious, what was your proudest moment during the process?
Gosh, I think my proudest moment, honestly, was finishing it, like submitting it and getting to that point. Cause like you submit a draft and it's like, it comes back and you're working through
back and forth.
Like I kind of didn't know when that part would end. And then like there was just that day where it was like you submitted it and it was like, great, awesome. And that was
the year 8 months with like about
next steps. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that, like it's done. My part is done. So I think that was, my proudest moment, because it just felt like a process that while I was in it, I was like, this process is never going to be done. Like I always going to have to write more, edit more, add things in, or think about stuff. And it just felt like this very ongoing, like huge process. And then when it was done, I was like, oh my gosh, it's done. And I just felt really, just really proud and like accomplished that it was like, here's this thing that I set out to do and I was able to do it. And, these professional editors and publishers were like, this is good. It's good enough. It's done. So that was my like moment of joy.
I love that. And so we're sort of getting close to the end of our conversation, but before we sort of wrap it up, tell us a little bit about like if somebody who's never sort of read your work before or sort of encountered you and they're hearing you on this podcast, oh, I want to read Nailah's book. It sounds awesome. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to find in this book.
Yeah. So it is definitely, I wanted to make it interactive. And I think that's just the coach in me. So what you will find is just a place where you could take a little bit of a deeper examination into what does well-being mean for you? What does self-care mean for you? And then having the opportunity to walk through it and kind of start to design some of these things and define these things for yourself, through the help of outdoor adventure. So there's, lots of activities, lots of exercises, lots of thought exercises, and then also a lot of just like tangible, actionable tips and tools so that you can start doing some of these things right away. So I think that's what you could really, anticipate. And, there's chapters on finding your joy. There's, chapters on kind of like creating your vision. There's, chapters on, like awe and just kind of the place that like awe has in our lives and how we can find that through the outdoors. So, and many other things, but I think it is just kind of, really slowing down, taking that time to think about yourself and to think about, how can I put some of these things into practice for myself on an every basis and bring a little bit of the outdoors into my life.
I like that. I do like that. And yeah, no, to me I'm listening to you and I feel like it's like this is all your loves like coming together in one thing because you've got like the coaching hat and the outdoor hat and the like it just it's like
Exactly. Yeah. It's a just beautiful meld of all the things I'm passionate about.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that. So one of the things I've added into the podcast this season is something called the Joy 5. So it's just 5 minutes and I'm just going to fire like rapid questions at you.
Okay.
So let's go. So first of all, name something that's bringing you joy right now.
Something that's bringing me joy right now. Actually, it just ended, but something that was brought me so much joy was the Olympics.
My heart. It literally brought me so much joy. I loved it. Like I said to one of my work colleagues, I was like, I love the Olympics so much that I'm pretty sure it can't happen if I'm not watching it. Like I'm certain of it. I love it. Oh.
So true. Yeah, I just love everything about it. I love, just the spirit of it and the triumph of it and these people who work so hard, and just, seeing them like put that blood, sweat, and tears out there. And, and all of the stories, it's just wonderful. And then I always love that. I feel like I always have someone to root for. So it's like, okay, I'm rooting for the American, and I was like, okay, if a Canadian comes through, awesome. Because I
was about to say, I've been rooting for Canadians sometime. And I, whenever I hear that Canadian national anthem come on, like, oh, Canada. I'm like, oh yeah.
I'm like, Canadians. And then it's like, okay, if there's like any, like Caribbean country, I'm rooting for you. So
Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Barbados, Jamaica. I am there.
Like, I feel like I could root for the whole world, all the different parts of me. And, I don't know. I think it's just such a joyful time.
Yeah, absolutely love it. All right. So what's something that you want to try that's just for fun, just for you?
I want to try, I really want to. There's a like little company here called School of Rock. So it's kind of like after the movie, but what they do is they like put you into like a little rock band. So you can, be like a singer. You can learn the guitar, keyboards, or drums. So for the instruments, you learn how to play, and then you create this little band and you go and like perform at like, like little like daytime like venues. And I really want to do it. I want to do the singing.
Oh yes, that makes me so happy. I love it. Let me know when you've got the band up. Get the band together.
Exactly.
I love it. Do you have any daily joy practices?
I drink a lot of tea. So I think one of my daily joy practices is just making a really nice cup of tea. I know I am speaking, I'm sure, to, your UK audience is probably like,
you are speaking to the Brits. They're all jumping out of their seats.
I've gotten lots of different teas. I got the little, like making like the little tea lattes, like, so getting the thing so it could like whisk up the milk and stuff and like so I've kind of like created a little tea corner in my kitchen, and that brings me a lot of joy. Like trying, like I've recently started making like matcha lattes, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, this is fun. I can make it at home. I've done like chai. I've done London fogs with Earl Grey. So trying different Earl Greys. And, so that brings me, that's kind of my little morning joy. And then also, my morning walk, I think, is another little morning joy thing. Cause I think it just feels wonderful to like start the day. You get out there, you get some sun on your face. We have a dog, so I usually take her along with me, and she's always excited to be outside. So, so that's my little morning joy routine.
I love it. And tell me something that you dread, but always makes you feel good afterwards.
Oh, what do I dread? Something I dread, but always makes me feel good afterwards. Probably cleaning. I don't like.
I would have to agree with you on that one, actually. There are quite a few things that I dread that make me feel good after, but there's nothing like having a clean house.
Yes, exactly. So I will definitely dread it where I'm like, I don't want to do this and I'll procrastinate and I have to kind of like pump myself up for it. But then afterwards, I'm like, oh, this was worth it. Just having like that clean house and just being able to relax and everything's where it's supposed to be. So yeah.
Love it. Love it. And we are at our 5 minutes. So I won't ask you any more rapid fire questions, but thanks for playing along with me. And before we wrap up, I'd love for you to tell the audience where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they can grab your book.
Yes, absolutely. So you could find me everywhere online at Nailah Blades. So just first name, last name. So that I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, but I'm a little bit more of a lurker on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, but not so much anymore. And I'm also on TikTok. So anywhere on social media at Nailah Blades. You could also find me online at nailahblades.com. And then if you want to follow along with our outdoor adventures, you could find us at We Color Outside on Instagram, and coloroutside.org is that website.
Perfect. I'll drop all the links into the show notes.
Yes, and then you can buy the book anywhere books are sold. So Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all of those. There's an ebook version. There's the hardcover version. But anywhere where you can find your books is where you can find Joyful by Nature.
Excellent. Do you recommend getting the physical book and a pen? Is that a recommendation?
Yeah, I do. So I love my Kindle. I do read a lot of ebooks, but I do recommend the physical book for this one because then you could do all of your exercises.
Yes. And I'm a stationery nerd. I've recently found an erasable pen and I might be in love. So just.
Oh, yeah, you'll have to let me know that because that's the downside of ink is
I might very well be in love. All right, Nailah, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a complete blast. We waited too long to do it. And I'm not going to wait until you write another book to connect. So I'll speak to you soon.
For a long time because all my words are out.
We'll see. We'll see. All right. Thanks, Nailah. And thank you, my listeners. And I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the show notes below. And don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, I send you big love.